In today's public school system, there is a huge discrepancy in equality among different socioeconomic backgrounds, especially when it comes to race and natural ability. This discrepancy is called the school-to-prison pipeline. The school-to-prison pipeline is a disturbing trend that funnels poor and minority students out of K-12 schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice system. This phenomenon is destroying the nature of what education is truly meant to achieve.
When I was young, if you act up, you had to write on the chalkboard, you had to help the teacher out, you had to do some type of remedial task that satisfied the environment in the school. That is no longer exist.
Across all grade levels, Black students represent about 16% of the overall student population, but are 32 to 42% of students who face out-of-school suspension, 27% of students referred to law enforcement, and 31% of students who experience school-related arrest. Black students are suspended or expelled at a rate 3 times higher than white students. 20% of Black boys and 12% of Black girls face out-of-school suspensions. This is where the school-to-prison pipeline starts. The NYCLU report paints a picture of communities whose young residents are subjects of police control, whether they are in school or on the streets, and whose most vulnerable young people are targeted rather than supported. The district with the most low-income students, District 7 in the Bronx, with over 85% of students qualifying for free or reduced lunch, also has the highest rate of suspensions. Students living in high-crime areas not only have to deal with the strain of police on the streets, but also in school. At Trent High School West, students enter every morning walking through metal detectors. When school lets out in the afternoon, students are watched by many security guards. Who is to blame for the school-to-prison pipeline? The school districts in each state's particular legislation that allows this to happen. School districts do not train the teachers and instructors properly on how to manage an inner-city classroom. Therefore, they force teachers and instructors to rely on maximum security measures that they have. In recent years, the scope of these policies has increased dramatically, allowing schools to utilize exclusionary discipline to address minor infractions. One 12-year-old girl was handcuffed in front of her classmates and arrested for drawing on her desk in New York. In Georgia, a 6-year-old kindergarten student was arrested for throwing a temper tantrum in class. The school-to-prison pipeline affects students of color in low-income areas who are already at a disadvantage. They do not only have to deal with poorly funded school systems, but poverty and crime. These environmental factors take a toll on students. These students face too many injustices as it is, and to be disciplined harshly is not fair. As for minor offenses, students end up in juvenile detention centers that do nothing to benefit them. Here are some stories.
I started to get in trouble around the age of 12. Sheesh. I really didn't like being at home that much. I had a lot of responsibilities. My mom worked a lot. She was a single mom. So it was better to be worried about myself and be on my own.
At 14, Savannah was locked up in one of Ohio's juvenile prisons, run by the Department of Youth Services, or DYS.
But I never fought as much till I got to DYS. I never really had conflicts with other people in school that much. I got into fights here and there, but not as much. Sometimes, I get anxiety, and that would be a way of releasing it. I would just throw stuff or do something, and that would carry on to something else, and it would lead to a fight.
When Savannah fought, she says she was placed in solitary confinement, 23 hours straight in a cell.
But if you're caught, you're arrested.
The juvenile justice system was created more than 100 years ago with the idea that kids aren't fully developed and they have the potential to change if they're given the opportunity.
Don't believe you're really a bad boy, and I'm not going to send you away this time.
The purpose of the adult system was to punish the offender. In juvenile, the objective of the statute is to rehabilitate the child or to turn the child around. I'll be the first to tell you, it's a lot easier to punish a person than to try and turn a child around.
Just like in other parts of the country, there was more punishment than rehabilitation.
sadly, what develops in places like this is a very kind of cynical, kind of cruel attitude towards the kids.
In 2011, the year Allen got arrested, kids in Ohio juvenile prisons spent 229,000 hours in isolation. That's an average of 306 hours per kid that year. The more time Allen spent inside, the worse his behavior got.
It just made me more aggressive. It made me more on the edge. I was always mad, like...
Youth who commit minor offenses can be tried as adults, something that happens to too many minorities. This is legal because in the 1990s, every state except Nebraska enacted the Get Tough juvenile policies, making it easier for youth to be tried as adults. And as a result, thousands of African American youth are treated as adults. This leads to youth of color adding to the already high numbers of adults of color in the criminal justice system. The Campaign for Fair Youth Sentencing states studies showed that youth of color are treated more harshly than white youth, even when arrested and prosecuted for the same offense. At this point in time, it would seem that America would be beyond such blatant inequality, but it's not. 1 out of every 8 African American youth who are convicted of killing someone will be sentenced to life without parole. 1 out of every 13 white youth convicted of murder. Murder is something that should have heavy sentencing, but race still should not be issued in how a child is sentenced. The school-to-prison pipeline was intended to help students, but all it's doing is making them worse. This is an issue that is currently happening right this second, and it must come to an end. This calls for solutions and reform. Organizations such as the NAACP have gone to court to fight against this issue. Yet, the greatest battlefront is what happens in the classroom. It is how the teachers control the classroom environment. Currently, some teachers and administrators may carry some sort of bias towards youth of color because of how they are stereotyped in general or in the media. Bias also plays an important role in the school-to-prison pipeline. Black males are facing increasing difficulties obtaining positive outcomes and avoiding negative ones, Davis said, in estimating the importance of the conference. We must change the way black males are perceived and perceive themselves. This is just one example of how bias interrupts the child's development in the classroom. If a child thinks of themselves as not good enough or just a criminal, and then goes to school thinking of themselves as a criminal, what is going to happen to that child? Probably to end up in the delinquency situation that they're expected to end up in. Or because the school enforces these delinquency attitudes by overestimating how to discipline them. Solutions to the school-to-prison pipeline are very simple. Decrease police presence and increase policies and programs that discipline students in a more humane way. Schools should feel more like centers of learning and not like jails. This environment victimizes innocent children who do not deserve such grief. Inner-city schools should assimilate to other school systems disciplinary policies, like tally systems that keep track of students' good and bad actions. Teachers need to be trained and know how to run an urban classroom. Simon Gosling, Mark Zablocki, Peter E. Leon mentioned staff development has the potential to shape policy and practices and settings, open, effective, and clear lines of communications, educate parents, students, and guardians, and encourage partnerships among schools, law enforcement, and the community. These solutions will help bring the community and schools together for the better.
I would like walk to class and then they would just put your hand out, like block you and telling you like you're a sheep or a cow or something. You know how cows, they gather in groups and stuff, they'll like push you to class and all that, and you say, oh, my class is this way, and then they'll like ignore you and just keep on pushing you towards the class that you don't even belong to. One of the new cops that patrol all schools. So like one day he came to the school. So I'm like, he was standing in the hallway. So I'm going to class. So he like, oh, why are you late? He started like getting like loud with me. So I felt like small compared to him. Like if I get loud with him, he gonna call some other agents and then it's gonna be a whole different situation. The teacher gets to go in without being scanned, and then we have to be scanned. It's like we are the prisoners and they are like the prison guard. I don't feel comfortable like when I go through metal detectors in the morning. It's like usually like crowded. The line ends up being long and then we end up being late to school. I feel like I'm in like prison or something.
As a society, we value education. At least we talk like we do. We recognize that education is the key to the future and that children are our future. But we behave in quite a different way, at least with regard to some kids.
I have the whole 9 yards. We got security, we got metal detectors. Sometimes they upgrade the security almost every year. And it's, you know, it's radical in my school.
Tens of thousands of students in New York City pass through metal detectors every single day just going to school. That means that sometimes they're subjected to invasive searches and pat-downs just because they're trying to get to class.
This is supposed to be school. Like, why are you treating me like I'm some kind of criminal or something in the school environment? Like, I'm supposed to be coming here to learn and gain my education, but now I'm coming in feeling like I'm going into prison.
There are more police in the New York City public schools than in virtually every large city in the nation, including Boston, Washington, D.C., you name it.
There would be incidences where having cologne or wearing a certain necklace or having like a gay pride bracelet or something. There was like students would always be harassed and suspended for little minor infractions.
Like a jail cell, we're getting patted down, locked up, scared. Why can't we just come to school and get our education? Why we gotta be locked up? Why we gotta be discriminated because based on our race, or even have skinning based on our race? Like, if you put it in a Caucasian neighborhood, I'm pretty sure they ain't gonna have skinning in there, you know? But like, you come to a neighborhood like this, where there's people of color, they have skinning.
For poor children of color in our public schools here in New York City and in too many other places around the country, we treat the kids as if they're not the hope for the future, as if they're criminals in waiting. The school-to-prison pipeline describes the bizarre phenomenon by which young people are pushed out of school by virtue of exclusionary discipline, suspensions, expulsions, or the practice of arresting them or giving them criminal court summonses for really minor misbehavior.
I've seen people get suspended for telling school safety, don't put your hands on me. I've seen people getting suspended in other schools, like my friends, for not going through the metal detectors because they feel like the school's prison, so they didn't want to go through the metal detectors, they got suspended. I've seen people getting suspended for coming to school late. I've seen people getting suspended for walking out the classroom to go to the bathroom.
I've seen plenty of kids drop out based off they felt school wasn't for them because of the environment they was in, you know, being suspended all the time. So they felt like, why bother coming to school if I'm gonna be suspended and I'm not gonna actually be in school.
The kids who are most likely to end up in the school to prison pipeline are in truth the ones who often need the most support. They're often kids who are struggling in school, who are having a hard time motivating to get to school every day, and all it takes is a small incident to escalate out of control for their entire academic career to be thrown off track.
Many of our youth go to schools that have metal detectors, bars on the windows, police, some that are NYPD off the streets that have guns. Some of the local schools have kind of holding rooms, holding cells for young people who've gotten into a fight or been arrested or are a problem student. And what this does is from day one, when you enter freshman year, is it starts to condition you that you are a criminal.
We act as if the kids are not worth saving, when instead of helping them understand how their behavior impacts their peers or themselves adversely sometimes and how to fix it, we just try to throw them out and lock them out and throw away the key. So I think that there's a disjunction between our societal values in children and in education and the reality of life for too many kids who are vulnerable.
I've become the person where I love school and I love educating myself, but now I only love educating myself and I hate school.
We call it the school to prison pipeline because when you push kids out of school, at any point, they're less likely to graduate and they're far more likely to end up in jail.
Under the New York Constitution, every child has a right to receive an education, a free public education, until he or she receives a high school diploma or turns 21.
I think the most important thing for a student to know is that just because you're going into school doesn't mean you have to check your rights at the door. You have rights, you have a right to privacy, you have a right not to be manhandled by teachers or police, and you have the right to be treated fairly. A school safety officer is an individual who is, in New York City at least, a peace officer, wears a police uniform, and is responsible for school safety and discipline.
I've seen school safety officers, you know, put kids in the chokehold. I've seen them have fist fights with students. I've seen them arrest students. I've seen them scream at students plenty of times for pointless reasons.
The truth of the matter is that school safety agents have a very, very hard job to do. They're sent out into the schools with just a few months of training, and unfortunately, all too often, they don't have a chance to get to know the kids that they're working with really well, and they're put in the most difficult situations with the least amount of support and training. We really need to make sure that it's the educators who are in charge of discipline. They're the ones who know the kids best, and they're the ones who are best able to ensure that kids learn right from wrong and learn from their mistakes.
The school safety officers resort to aggressive methods rather than dealing with the students like one-on-one and trying to get to understand them.
If there's an imminent danger to the health and safety in a particular situation, we can talk about the role for the police. But as a routine matter, education belongs in the hands of educators.
5 years ago, the New York Civil Liberties Union filed a suit on behalf of several New York City public school children who had been subjected to unlawful arrests and uses of force by members of the NYPD School Safety Division. We brought the lawsuit because we thought that way too many kids were being subjected to bad arrests and uses of force by school safety agents when they were just going about their business in school and maybe engaged in misbehavior that a few years ago would have subjected them to a visit to the principal's office instead of a trip to the precinct.
I've had instances where we had police assigned to our building who I believe overreacted to particular incidents. You know, and even involving the macing of a student who was handcuffed, you know, from one of the other schools, and you have to step up and fight for that. That officer's no longer here, and was removed because I believe we impressed upon his supervisor that his approaches were that there was an overreaction. And just a violation of the child's rights, and we wanted to make sure that we advocated for our kids and that this was not going to continue in our building.
The goal of the lawsuit is to get the NYPD to create new policies, new training programs, and supervision practices for the School Safety Division to make sure that no more kids suffer bad arrests or unlawful uses of force.
If you're going to lead anything, in this case a school, I think it's critically important that you understand your authority, that you understand your responsibility to advocate for children. It's often said that teachers have unions and administrators have unions and the cafeteria workers have unions and the children do not. You're their union.
If you come at me with an attitude, obviously I'm a human being, I'm gonna react yelling back or with an attitude back, and then the situation escalates when it just could have been, hey, what you doing? Why you doing that? Don't do that. Go back to class, or da-da-da, da-da-da. Or 3 warning at least, a 3-count warning. But no, the first approach is with attitudes, disgusting, it's nasty, you're yelling at me, you're screaming at me early in the morning. Nobody wants to hear that. You don't know if I'm going through anything at home. You don't know what happened. You don't know if a family member had passed away. You don't know if I'm just, my mind is everywhere. I'm a human being, even though I'm a teenager, I'm a human being and my feelings get hurt a lot. And the same way you want respect is the same way I demand respect too.
The relationship between educators and police and children in schools is crying out for an overhaul. There is no way that police should not be answerable to the principal of the school. Principals need to be put in charge with their teachers and their social workers and their psychologists and their guidance counselors who are trained to support children as they try to learn and become adults.
Educators should be in charge of discipline. They're the ones who know their students best, and they are best suited to help kids learn from their mistakes and get onto the right track. Sometimes police personnel's involvement in situations just escalates them instead of de-escalating them.
Have an SSA officer telling you what to do, pushing you around, making you feel like you're not safe and secure within your schools, like you're being bullied within your school. And an SSA officer shouldn't have an authorization to bully someone.
And there are police in schools. They need to be answerable to, and they need to work as part of a team of adult professionals, and they need to be held accountable when they do things wrong and when they violate the rights of children. Life without the school-to-prison pipeline is indeed possible.
I think most of the situations can be dealt with, just to sit down and talk rather than to just go straight to suspension and stuff like that.
Nobody in school should be allowed to violate the rights, the dignity, the privacy, the bodily integrity, or the right to fairness that every child enjoys.
New Yorkers, we're strong people. We fight for what we believe in. And I don't believe in all these policing in schools.
At the end of the day, we believe that bringing young people together with different experiences, they're able to build with one another and able to help each other through everything from drugs and violence to not knowing what it's like to be a teenager in the South Bronx. I will never call one of my youth bad. I will never tell one of my young people, like, you can't change or you can't do better.
It takes a village to raise a child. Anyone who works with kids will tell you that they do best when everyone pitches in and they feel like they are in a nurturing and safe environment.
A school that has a supportive disciplinary environment is going to be a school that has a supportive and creative academic environment.
Give me the one you consider bad. Give me the one that you think is giving you a hard time or behavior issues. I'll turn them into community leaders.
Getting rid of the school-to-prison pipeline isn't the answer to all our educational needs and dreams, but it sure is an important start.
Next, a look into the poor state of education for the 60,000 children locked up in juvenile detention facilities across the nation. Hari Srinivasan takes us inside one state that's working to do better. It's another in our ongoing series, Broken Justice.
Graduation day in Lowell, Massachusetts, with all the typical fanfare, balloons, beaming parents, and motivational speeches.
All of you are sitting there trying to figure out, okay, where is this going to go? What am I going to be when I grow up? I guarantee you that every single adult in this room had the same thought at 17, 18, 19.
Yet these kids aren't like most graduating from high school this time of year. At some point in their young lives, each was convicted of a crime and sentenced to the care of the Department of Youth Services, the state's juvenile corrections agency. And though they've since earned back far more freedom, they graduate in custody.
Getting committed to DYS is a stressful time, and I'm proud of all of you and myself for sticking to what's important, getting an education and bettering ourselves.
On any given day across the country, 36,000 teenagers and young people are held in long-term state custody, more than 60 days, and 2/3 of them are Black and Latino. In the past 20 years, this incarcerated population has dropped by about half, and many are now looking at how to improve education and thus outcomes for juveniles who end up in this system.
When you look at this population, they've been suspended multiple times, haven't progressed very far in the educational system, dropped out, been expelled, and we wanted to make sure that when these kids are coming back to the community, we knew education was key.
Michael Thompson is executive director of the Council of State Government's Justice Center, a nonprofit whose recent report looked at education in juvenile detention settings in all 50 states.
If you asked anybody on the street, what's important to helping turn this kid's life around, they're going to say, well, they need an education. So I think everybody assumes they get a certain quality of education while they're incarcerated, but it turns out this is not an educational system that is held accountable to the same kind of standards that the public education system is.
His group found large gaps from state to state in education available to juvenile populations, and that only 1/3 of states require incarcerated kids meet the same educational standards as those in public schools.
We have art class, we have gym class, math, history, everything you'd find in a regular school, we have here as well.
One state that is doing better is Massachusetts, by matching standards inside detention with what students would receive on the outside, tracking students' progress through the system, and helping kids return to the community.
Excuse me, I just have to actually lock this behind you. Okay, so welcome to Judge Conley.
Lynn Allen runs the Judge John Connolly Detention Facility in Boston, the state's most restrictive. One advantage, unlike most states, Massachusetts centralizes juvenile education rather than spreading it among state, local, and private agencies.
I'm assuming some of these kids are in for pretty serious crimes.
They are. This facility works with young men up to manslaughter charges. So we do have some kids who have a pretty good history behind them, but the charges that have brought you here don't have to define who you are.
In 2015, 17-year-old Josh was convicted of manslaughter. He spent the past 10 months at Connolly and has another 8 to go. Like the other 14 young men here, he lives on a secure detention floor, his movement constantly monitored.
Right, because the 2 lines are parallel.
But for 5.5 hours a day, he and the others are in school downstairs, attending academic classes like English and math. vocational courses like AV engineering, aka DJing.
The shield protects the signal inside the wires.
Or how to build copper wiring and Ethernet jacks. Josh recently began psychology classes online through Bunker Hill Community College, credits he hopes to put towards the University of California when he gets out.
I always wanted to go to California, and I skateboard, and I always wanted to go to college, so I feel like put them all together, that'll just be dope.
Is the goal of the state to make you realize the gravity of what you've done?
Yeah.
Is that going to happen while you're here and in class and taking an online course?
Well, for me, I just have goals for myself, and I definitely do feel bad for what happened, and I definitely want to do better for the people. I have 2 younger brothers, so they look up to me, and I have people that see a lot in me, and I don't want to really let them down, or myself down for that matter. So
They're coming back to communities. We want these kids to come out with the skills to succeed, right? And we know they can succeed because they're amazingly resilient.
We're logged into your account.
Another key difference is Massachusetts' support through education coordinators and caseworkers, people assigned to guide each student into and out of this system, making sure education plans, grades, and credits transfer from and back to school.
When a kid who's incarcerated, they're going to get out, you ask the question then, well, how is that student going to follow up and enroll in school once they're released? Many of these schools, for reasons you can probably imagine, want nothing to do with the student when they come back. So the question then becomes, well, who's going to manage this transition? Who's going to do that? Well, it turns out that in most states, it's up to the parent and the kid to actually manage that transition.
Education and career counselor Kelly McMorrow works with Josh and about 75 other young men at any given time.
It seems in some ways that there are these big systemic forces weighing down on them by the time they get here, right? They've made a bad decision clearly by the time they've gotten here. How do you turn that around in the limited amount of time that you have with them in a place like this?
It's challenging, but I think that's our biggest goal, is to find what makes them tick, what passions they have, and try to help them figure out what path they want to take so that they can go down a positive road, so that they're not labeled and defined by whatever their charge is.
Finally, managing the transition from lockup to a secure facility like Connolly and eventually back to the community, often through halfway houses like this one, is crucial, says Commissioner Peter Forbes.
Because if we have kids come in and advance grade levels and do great work, and we don't hand that off to anything constructive in the community, it's half a loaf. So we're really trying to leverage the work that goes on while they're in placement with a positive transition that translates into traction in the community.
Back in Lowell, 20-year-old John Cody estimates that he lived in nearly 24 different juvenile facilities around the state during his more than 6-year tenure. This fall, he's headed to a 4-year college where he plans to play football.
Being locked up, you lose a lot of life experiences where you gain, wisdom and stuff. And if you can get your education in there, at least you'll have something going for you. If you don't have education or work experience or anything, you're going to be lost. When you come out, you're going to have no friends. Your family probably not going to care much. You're not going to have anything.
And many say that's a prospect still far too many young people across the nation continue to face. From Boston, Massachusetts, I'm Hari Srinivasan for the PBS NewsHour.